Yes, so after a while, the extensions all went to a succeeded state. So this is the first node. So let's check the other node. So let's go back to Azure Stack HCI node number 2, go to extensions, and there validate that all of your extensions, especially the lifecycle manager, is also in a succeeded state. With this, we can proceed with the installation of Azure Stack HCI. I'm going to the Arc wizard or dashboard. I select my Azure Stack HCI infrastructure and I hit the deploy cluster button on the right hand side. Then I'll choose the correct resource group. I'll give the cluster a name, which is HCI nested. And I place it into the West Europe region, right? Not all of those regions are supported. Not all of the Azure regions are supported. As I have placed my resources in West Europe, I'll choose that, otherwise they won't show up here at the bottom. Now, during the installation, we need a key vault for creating Azure Stack HCI, right? Where the secrets go, the passwords go. So this will be, something that will be put into here. So let's create another key vault. Now I select the 2 nodes and hit validate selected servers. If you have not waited long enough for all the extensions to go green or succeeded, then you would have a failure here probably, right? But all was good on our system, hence we get a green, hence we can continue. Okay, we start out with a new configuration, but be sure, if you do this multiple times, you can sort of download the specification, store it in, under the templates in your subscription, and then you can reference it, using the template spec, right? So that you don't need to type in everything from scratch, right? You would just, reload the settings that you have been using previously, right? But let's start with the new configuration, as I assume that you're new to this. And I'll start out with the settings that I don't want to have a storage switch separately, right? In a physical world, that would mean that your SMB adapters are sort of, that they have a direct cabling. They are not traversing a switch. They are, sort of stitched together directly with a crosslink cable, sort of, right? In our environment, it's a similar approach. And therefore I'm using the no storage switch for that. The next thing is I would use a custom configuration that's sort of defined by the setup of the virtualized setup that we are using here, right? Because we want to use our management traffic separately, right? So that means we do have a network adapter that should be used only for the management traffic, right? And we don't want to place it on the same network as the virtual machines. Remember, the management network goes to the domain controller, which is our default router, and we don't, we don't have the routing from the compute ones. So let's configure it that way. And I disable jumbo frames. I also disable RDMA on that traffic or on that management adapters. Then I add another intent for, with HCI, remember we have 3 different traffic classes: management, compute, and storage. And we all need to configure all of those, right? So let's configure the compute traffic separately, right? Which is, let's give it a name, compute. Network adapter 1 would be compute 1, And we do have a redundant network adapter, right, which is compute2. So that could be, for example, your 10 gigabit physical network adapters if you would have, if you were doing that exercise on physical hardware, right? And I tried to sort of simulate this with the virtual environment that we have here. Okay, in our environment, and I would assume that's sort of happening for most of the folks out there, would you be using jumbo frames in your virtual machines, right? And that means you would need to configure jumbo frames consistently on all of the upper level switches that connect you to the internet, right? Most of the times that's being done, therefore we do it as default. However, that's not there for all of the folks out there. In my environment, it probably works with the 9K frames, right? As we are using internal stuff, but I don't want to have RDMA enabled for my virtual machines at this stage, right? Because my network adapters and my other stuff is not supporting it. I don't really need it, and it may, if your network adapter does not support it, then your deployment may fail here, right? Okay, last one is the traffic type storage, which is, let me take that one. And we also do have two adapters left, which is SMB1 and SMB2. For these, you need the VLAN IDs or the VLANs, right? And with that, I would leave it as the defaults in this environment, right? Because we have been running a script before that definitely explicitly allows only these two VLAN IDs to be used on that network adapters. Other than that, usually these two settings here would be a good thing, depending on what your network adapters, what your physical adapters really support, right? So you would need to look up the technical specifications of your physical network adapters, right? Which values to choose here. Important, right? However, for my nested environment, for my virtual environment where I have simulated network adapters, I am not using this. Although it would be a very good thing to do, or I would highly recommend to do it on a physical environment, but on a virtual environment, you should be able to do this. You should be disabling it, right? Okay, no worries about that. So good for physical, not so good for virtual environments. Okay. Next thing would be the IP addresses to choose. Remember, we do have a private IP address range that we are being using in our environment. So let's maybe start from the 10, right? And add an IP address range. Let's give them 20 IP address ranges to be used with a Class C subnet mask. The default gateway here is our domain controller, which is the 0.1, right? And this one is also the DNS server, right? And with that, we've been registering with the domain, and we've also been able to communicate to the outside world. Okay, so let's have a look there. That looks good. And be careful with this, right? Because most of the issues when it comes to real deployment are sort of coming from a bad network setup. Custom location name will be used as a drop-down box for someone that will create virtual machines on top of Azure Stack HCI. From the Azure portal, he will be asked for where to place it, and the drop-down that he gets will use that name, right? So the custom location name pinpoints to a specific cluster setup. So make sure that you have a self-speaking name like nested HCI or HCI nested, I was telling, right? HCI nested 0815, and I would say custom location, for example, right? Cloud Witness, I don't have one yet, so this will be a storage account to be used for as a a gatekeeper or like a witness, a referee that, you know, that in terms if your cluster cannot reach to the other node, he can at least try to ask the witness that's up in the cloud in an individual data center if he should take over the cluster or not, right? Okay, so let's take that one. And now I do have my organizational unit. So let's copy that maybe from that view here. So I've enabled advanced features. If I do a right click, I'm lazy. Copy out, you know, that organizational unit. Let's place it here. So that means our domain is called HCI .org. Okay. Okay, be sure that you name it this correctly. I think I've specified 2 zeros at the end, right? And typos are very harmful here because the deployment would kick off, but then it would fail because you have typed maybe an O instead of a 0. Then that's not good. Okay, the deployment user, you've seen it here, is called ASLCM user. ASLCM user. And the password was the complex one. Okay. Then we do have the local admin account. If you don't remember, you know, the local admin account, go back to your PowerShell code where we have you know, the post install scripts, you know, look it up. He is called AS local admin, right? And let's type that one in, AS local admin, and you can also copy the password out of it. Yeah, the correct one. Okay. Next, for the security defaults, you know, as this is a nested environment, and I don't want to, you know, sort of get into problems with the hardware not supporting one or the other feature. I am, you know, I'm lazy here. It is a demo environment. Just for making sure that everything works, I disable all the security settings. However, in a usual environment, you would go with the recommended settings, that's for sure. Okay, do you want to create the volumes, only the required volumes? That would be that switch. However, if you want to create the user volumes, the ones that should be used for, you know, putting the virtual machines on top of it, then you would select the default, which is create the other volumes as well. Okay, tags, no, I'm lazy now. And now I'm kicking off the validation of this cluster. Okay, so interesting to note. So some things will happen on the Azure side of things, which is, you know, it will be checked if you have the right permissions for the key vaults, for example. If you have forgotten to add the roles for you under the key vault administrator kind of thing, then this one would probably show up and produce an error, right? Yeah, that will take some time, and I will, in the meantime, I will navigate to the host and navigate to a directory which is called cloud deployment logs. And as you should be seeing, there will be some script or some log being issued in a second when you hit the validation button here, right? So usually it should, you know, in that kind of nested environment and with that walkthrough, it should work. However, sometimes it probably will end up in an error, especially if you do it the first time, right? Where you may have misconfigured some things. Hence, you will need to have some log details where you can look up what went wrong. And for that is the path that I was just navigating to, right? So do a dir and see, you know, because there will be a script that is kicked off during when you hit the validation button, right? There will be some scripts that will be kicked off, right, depending on how long you wait. The most important one, or the most interesting one, is the environmental full validator one, right? So let's do a get content here and jump into this one and do a wait to see all the details, right? If there would be any errors, any issues, right, wrong IP addresses being used, IP conflicts, cannot reach the internet kind of things, right, it would mention that here, right? So let's, pause here for a moment and see how the validation goes, right? Okay, so this is what we want to see. If the action plan completed, then do a Control C for, or Control X for breaking the view. So that's what we wanna see. And now we can proceed with the installation, with the main bit of the or the main action that we want to do. So let's kick off the create button, and that will trigger the deployment. And as said before, if you want to replay this deployment, this would be the time to save the template, from here into your maybe code repository, right? So just hit the download button here and download the full Azure Stack HCI script, or put it into a template gallery, right? So that you can use in order to replay this and select it at a later time, right? Yes, so let's jump back to the deployment, because that will take some time, right? So you may have navigated throughout the portal and may not have where to find that deployment one more time. You just go back to the cluster itself and then go to deployments, and then you should see the deployment steps. So this will take a while. The thing that you notice, be patient here, is if you go back to the node and have a look at the directory, there is now one more log file that is being created, the cloud deployment log, which is actually written at the point in time where you kicked off the deployment, right? And there's still also, it's possible to do the get content on this one with a wait. Okay, let's do a wait and see what's being done on this one as well. So it will pause another validation phase, some other things may be checked, and then this view as well will change, and the actual deployment will take place, right? So this may take some time. It may also depend on the performance of your physical hypervisor, how fast the disks are, and then that will influence how fast you will progress here. All right. So I'll have another coffee and refresh that view on the Azure portal from time to time, and fast forward the video a little bit. Okay, so let's refresh. The deployment has successfully finished. It almost took 3 hours, starting from 11:06 until 1 p.m. 45 minutes. Yeah, now we have a successfully installed Azure Stack HCI. Congratulations.